Mrs. Dorothy McKissack Jordan is a lifelong citizen of Sumner County. She is the daughter of the late Dr. W.E. McKissack and Mrs. McKissack. Dr. McKissack, as some of you might know, was a dentist in this county. And not only that, he was one of the people that was very instrumental in the development of the Clearview Park in the city. Mrs. McKissack retired from the Sumner County School System, and I think she had one of the most beautiful voices that I've heard. She was a teacher of music and of voice. Mrs. Dorothy Jordan received her training at this university, where she received a BA degree with a major in English and a minor in music. She received the master's degree at Tennessee State with a major in business education. Mrs. Jordan ran away from us for a while and went to Whiteville, Tennessee to teach. While in Whiteville, Tennessee, she was a teacher of English. Then she returned to what we call the old Union High School here in Sumner County. But I must tell you that the old Union High included grades from 1 through 12 at that time, and Mrs. Jordan was the teacher of the 3rd and 4th grade. Then she moved to the new Union High, which is presently Rutherford Stewart School, and I want you to just listen to the subjects that she taught there. You won't believe it. She was a teacher of 7th and 8th grade English, the librarian, teacher of typing, shorthand, accounting. She was a counselor for the 9th grade students. She was the directress of the music guild. She taught music theory, and it's 1 or 2 other things that she did that we won't mention. Presently, Mrs. Jordan is very active in the Keith Stewart United Methodist Church, where she is the organist and the chairman of the music department. She is a Christian lady. She is an outstanding citizen in the city of Gallatin and in Sumner County. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to most of you, I'm sure, and introduce to others, Mrs. Dorothy McKissack Jordan. I almost pinch myself to talk about me. I appreciate those words and Mr. Haynes, President of the Historical Society and coordinator of this program, Dr. Deotha Malone, Vice Mayor of the City of Gallatin, members and friends and faculty members and teachers, both retired and active. And I want you to allow me first to thank all those who gave me material to bring to you tonight. And you can hardly do all this just by yourself, so I had quite a bit of help. So I want you to know that if you're interested in our history, we have a rich history here in Sumner County, and I know there's so many people who are not aware of it. But I also want you to allow me to express my gratitude for asking me to speak on Black education in Sumner County. Gallatin is my home. I was born over there on Trigg Street, and as she told you, I was born to Dr. Mrs. McKissack. Everybody called her Miss Calabelle. And at that time, we lived at 77 Trigg, and it was street at that time. I think it's avenue now. You know, we improved our street name. So she retired after 40 years of teaching, and I retired after 38.9 years in the teaching profession. So together we gave Sumner County 77.9 years of service. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but I just can't count. But 1 year, Dr. Malone told you, I spent in another county. Just in case some of you might not know some of the interesting history about the city of Gallatin, let us go back and give ourselves a little background of this wonderful place in which we live. I call it the garden spot of the world. Much of this information was compiled by the teachers of Gene
and genes teacher of Sumner County in 1944-45, and they are to be commended. The history I bring to you tonight will have two eras. By the way, we are one race that has a multiple choice of names. We can call ourselves Negro, colored, black, Afro-American. We can call ourselves African-American. Now, if you can think of another race that has more names, I want you to tell me. The first era will take us from slavery to 1945, and the second era will take us from 1946 to desegregation and integration. James Trousdale was the original owner of the land upon which the city of Gallatin is located. This was about the year 1780. The county of Sumner at this time was infested with Indians who commenced their heaviest attack upon the white settlers in 1784. This continued until 1789. The General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, by an act passed November 6, 1801, appointed Samuel Donaldson and other commissioners to purchase 40 acres of land and lay out a town for the seat of justice called Gallatin, to superintend the sale of lots, the erection of public buildings, and so forth. The act also provided that all general elections should be held in the house of Captain James Trousdale. Now, you know we have Trousdale Place right down over there somewhere in Gallatin. So this is all pertaining to that, until the courthouse should be erected and accepted. Accordingly, the commissioners on the 25th day of February 1802, which was 189 years ago, purchased of James Trousdale for $490. The original site of the town of Gallatin, containing 421.2 acres, including 1 acre reserved by the Grand Talk and 1.5 acres in the public square. Sumner County was divided into 19 communities, not including the city of Gallatin. If we consider the city of Gallatin as a community, there would be a division of 20 communities. Since I am limited to education, I shall name these communities and give you a brief summary of the education in each. Hartsfield Community. This was one community that my mother taught, and I think she made $25 a month. Schools in Hartsfield Community, the church, schools and church played an important part in the organized group life of the community. One of the customs was when someone died, school was closed sometimes for a week. The school and the church was the same building, and in the last 6 to 8 years of its existence, progress was seen on the inside. In place of the newspaper walls and blue building paper, which proved very unattractive and dark, paint was used and other improvements were gradually made. Peach Valley Community. Peach Valley is a section of Gallatin, Sumner County, 4 miles on Lock 4 Road, and 1 mile to the left on Peach Valley Lane. It seems to have been discovered back in the 1860s by a group of home seekers from the north. The name of this section originated from the enormous amount of peaches grown by the settlers. They called it Peach Valley. Later, the name was changed to Fairview. This name was not retained very long. Due to the fine, proper peaches, it soon was recalled Peach Valley, which name it now bears. There was 1 colored church and there was 1 colored school building in this section. Both races worked together in the best of spirits. Chapel Island. St. John's School. Chapel Island, located on the Long Hollow Pike, received the name Island because the creek has so many branches, some of which are located on nearly every farm. This creek, known as Drake Creek, runs on both sides of the road. A slave, William Lee Turner, was a school teacher. He first taught school at Mount Olive, known as Peach Valley, later at Chapel Island in the church. He was the first teacher at Chapel Island. Then there was George Drain, another slave and teacher. Another slave and minister was John Mitchell, who brought about the purchase of the land and school buildings. A survey of Stark Knob Community. These people rented an unoccupied cabin to have school, and it only lasted for 3 months. Later on, Jim Rutherford built the first school in this community. Kansas. The first Negro settlers of Kansas were slaves. The first settlers were Shane Rogan, Wesley Winchester, and Reverend Chennault. They purchased their land from Mr. Barr and Mr. Tyree. The slaves knew nothing at all about education. They were not allowed to look at books or anything concerning education. The slave parents were often sold from their children. The first school and church were built together in a thicket. The first teacher was Mr. Dillon. The ladies of the community had a canning class. The equipment was furnished by the government, and the government paid the instructors to teach the class. Oak Grove. This community, located on the old Louisville and Nashville Turnpike, what is now known as United States Highway 31W, was originally named Broomsage, and the first community center or house was the log building that served as a combination church and school. Avondale. Avondale was named by Mr. Ed Gardner. This rich white settler was a prominent man and a lover of race horses. He named Avondale after one of his horses. This settlement was once a part of Summersville, but after Mr. Gardner bought this stretch of land, he named it Avondale. School was carried on by going from home to home each day. The teacher was Miss Calls from the north. The school in 1945 was considered modern. It was built of rock and was equipped with modern necessities. Some of the earlier settlers were Mr. Will Howard, Mrs. Fanny Cullum, Mrs. Avery Bender, and Mr. Matt Taylor. Odom's Bend. Odom's Bend gets its name from Eli Odom, a white man who sold land to several early settlers. Among them were Buck Odom, Bill J. Franklin, Gabriel Wiley, Tom J., Frank Campbell, Levi Anderson, and Tom Green. There was very little said about the school in this community. Howard Knott. Howard Knott is located 5.5 miles west of Gallatin near Station Camp Creek. There was only one school and one church during the early days. It became one of the modern rural schools by 1945. Cairo. The first settlers were Jack Davis, Henry Swain, Jim Williams, Sonny Malone, Herbert Robb, Callis Robb, Jack Wilkes, Burt Bullock, and Faith Park. All of these persons were slaves. The schools that existed were the poorest sort. Many teachers were mere school keepers who had but little knowledge as to what was suitable for a child to study in school. Scattersville. Scattersville Negro community is located 4 miles west of Portland, between Highway 109 and 31W on 52. Due to the small number of people living in the community when it was settled, the children walked for miles to an adjoining community school at Corntown. The first school built was a rough one-room building that was replaced by a 3-room building with a fairly good facility. The first teacher in the community was Mary Wallace. Mrs. Tony Watkins followed her. Then came Lee Gooch, Professor Sullivan, Hattie Harris, Mrs. Bradley, Lucille Bracken, Mrs. Wilkes, Laura Jessica Oliver, Ella Lee Odom, Professor Tyree, Ola Mae Robinson, Robert Smith, Queen Ola State, Harold Smith, Alice Gray Smith, and Alan Francis Brewer. Village Green. Village Green is located on the Red River Road, which is west of Gallatin, Tennessee. It was so named because of its many hills, fertile soil, and green pasture land. A little way from the village on the Liberty Road was born one of Gallatin's most prominent women in the person of Mrs. Diora Burstreet, who for many years taught in the schools of Sumner County and retired from teaching April the 20th, 1945. The late Reverend Peter Burstreet was the first school teacher at Village Green and preacher, as was the custom of early days for all that preached should teach. Later he became principal of Union High, the city school of Gallatin, Tennessee. Macedonia. Macedonia is located in the southern part of the county in Beloit Bend. It is named after a very prominent family called Beloit. The Macedonia School was once a part of the Hickory Grove School taught by Professor Kinney, the father of our schools in Sumner County. Because the children had so far to go, the people thought it would be to their advantage to run a school in Beloit Bend. The board of directors and the superintendent agreed to give them a school. Later, a church was organized. as a branch from the Hickory Grove Church. It was Union Church. This church and school were named after a city in Europe called Macedonia. At present, there is one church, and the people usually give their support. Its motto, "Come over and help us," was originated about 1892. Hickory Grove. When the teachers made a survey of this community, they were grateful to the following for information concerning this community. Professor C.B. Bates and sister, Mrs. Emma Bullock, Mrs. Betty Harper, Mr. and Mrs. Hal Malone, Professor T.B. Tyree, and Mr. and Mrs. Foster Harper. With little experience and no education, the parents succeeded in raising their children and sending them to almost one-grade schools until finally the school system was established and better schools were provided. The people of Hickory Grove community had need to be proud of the progress they had made and still can look with pride to the following outstanding persons who, as products of the meager beginning and long suffering with which their forefathers struggled, are making great contributions to civilization in their respective fields. Mrs. Nettie Porter, granddaughter of Gary Parrish, retired from teaching in Davidson County. Walter Tyree owned 80 acres in Oklahoma with oil wells yielding 600 barrels of oil a day. Also another grandson, Professor Peter Tyree, a teacher and preacher. George Branham, Anthony Branham's grandson, was the lead of singers for Ford Motor Company, called Ford 68. Dr. Charles James Bates, a practicing physician in Tulsa, Oklahoma today. Mrs. Ola Mae Bates Robinson, teacher once at Old Ben and Union High School at Gallatin. Wilbur Bates, agricultural teacher in West Tennessee, and then went to Tallahassee, Florida, and is now retired. Professor C.B. Bates retired from teaching in 1945. All of the Bates were college graduates. Mrs. Nora Bates was a genuine good English teacher at Union High School. Miss Sally Ward taught the first school in a one-room log hut that had one door, one window, and a stick and dirt chimney. Children walked in many instances 6 miles to school and were seldom late. A plot of ground was given by Anthony Branham for a schoolhouse and Union Church. Durham Chapel Community. The first Negro settlers of this community were slaves and did not receive any educational training. They did not have books or papers to use. If many of them were caught looking at books, they were often punished. There was not a schoolhouse or any permanent building for the first school of Durham's Chapel. It was taught at different places. Mr. Rodney Durham, a prominent white settler of that community, gave to the colored people a plot of land for the school and church. The colored people decided that with the help of their white friends and the county board of education, they would build a schoolhouse on the church ground. A one-room building was erected. This soon was only enough room to accommodate about 2/3 of the children. The 10th and 11th districts agreed to pay the first teachers. A few years later, another one-room building was erected. This one was larger than the first. This was a frame building. It was often referred to by the older people of the community as the Little Red Schoolhouse. As years passed and the scholastic population increased, it was necessary to build a larger building. It was then that a Rosenwald building was erected. This was a large building consisting of 2 large rooms and a nice kitchen. It had 2 teachers and a large enrollment. Seward is a very small community located in the northwest of Sumner County. The community received its name from an outstanding Negro family by the name of Stewart. The late Elijah Stewart gave a plot of land for a school building which was known as Stewart School. The late Mrs. Tina Stewart contributed much to the progress of the school. The church and school were the only recreation centers of the community. Hall's Chapel. Hall's Chapel community is located 4½ miles north of Gallatin on the L&N Railroad, equal distance 1½ miles from either pike. The Douglas on the west, Darwin's on the east. Being isolated from communication, Hall's Chapel became but a very small community. It was so established as a result of the Civil War as far back as 1845. Of these, the Jim Hall family was the largest from whom the community was named. The family consisted of 15 children, the most of whom were boys, married, and settled, increasing the family life of the community. About the year 1874, the group came together and built a one-room school, having one door and 4 windows, where Ella Martin became the first teacher in which church services were held for many years before a church house was erected, 1881. Both school and church were built on the Hall of Faith. Rockland Community. The first Negroes came here as slaves, possibly with Robinson in his overland trip about the year 1780. They settled in what was then Davidson County, which covered the territory west of Cumberland Mountains. The white master had power over his slaves, even in matters of religion. There were no free Negroes in this section of the county. The slaves were given no education. At the close of the Civil War in 1865, when Tennessee freed her slaves, the Negroes in this section of the county were freed and not given anything. At first, they worked as sharecroppers for the white people and were permitted with what money they earned to buy homes at Rockland because the land there is rocky and unproductive. All the Negroes owned their own homes in 1945. The first school for colored people was established in 1867. The first teachers were white people who came down from the north to teach the colored people. The first school room was a brush shack, and the school term was 3 months. The first church was erected in 1880, and school was taught in the church. This church soon fell down. A stone church was built, and it split in half and fell. Evidently, they needed a good car. The first separate church and school building was built in 1895. The school was a small frame building and was replaced in 1927 by a modern Rosenwald school. The school was an elementary school. The majority of the children finished the 8th grade. There was no bus transportation furnished in this community, which proved to be a major handicap for those children during their education in high school. The majority of the high school students attended school in Davidson County. The Davidson County school bus came within 1 mile of the community, which offered an opportunity for them to attend school in Davidson County. Parker Chapel Community. The first settlers arrived in the village of Old Field about the year of 1870, namely Jack and Seton Perdue, Harry and Sam Grove, Haywood and Frank Dye, Lal and Wesley Copley, and their families. In the early days, the school system was very poor. The church was used for classrooms, and the teachers were poorly educated. The first teachers were Professor Bush and Mrs. Petunia Watkins. They would carry the pupils through the 3 R's and the tomb of the hickory stick. At the time of integration, a modern Rosenwald school building had been constructed. Oakfield had 4 college graduates, 3 ministers, musicians, carpenters, bricklayers, painters, beauticians, blacksmiths, and 1 auto mechanic, who all owned their own homes. Gallatin. Before 1900, there were few homes owned by Negroes. Mrs. Cornelia McEwen, Mrs. Harriet Ballard, Messrs. Hart, Woodson, Head, and Reuben Carr were among the first to own good homes. The pioneer ministers were Reverend Bob Below and Hillary Keith, of whom I am an indirect descendant. Reverend Keith. The first school was held in a house at Fairview and was taught by Henrietta White and Hillary Keith. The next school was taught in a church at Powell Knob by a man named Simpson. Children from Peach Valley and Mount around attended. A school was next started at Peach Valley and Gallatin. The school term lasted about 5 months. It usually closed about November or December. The term lasted 6 months in Gallatin. Children were taught from charts. The only book used was a Webster's Spelling, a reader and speller combination. The Union High School in Gallatin represented its 3rd school building. The first was used by the white race about the year 1876. This was an old brick, mostly built by the Indians. During the 70s, the white people built Howard College and gave this old building over for Negroes to use. Phoenix became the first instructor and was soon succeeded by Professor H.H. DeWitt, and then Lottie Withers, James Bates Fry, Cullen Gordon, and finally Reverend Peter Bertree. The second school was that of a frame type, which lasted for only a short time. During the early 20s of the 19th century came the making of a new school building having a chapel and 8 rooms, main floor, and full-size base. This building was completed in 1922 under the administration of Dr. J.N. Rucker, principal. Other additions were made as time went on. Keith Chapel Methodist Church received its name from Hillary Keith, who gave the land on which the church was built during the year 1866. Daily school for Negroes was provided in 1876. The first pastor was Miles Martin. No choir, music, or any equipment of convenience was had. Members would stand around the altar and sing. As you can see, the church and school worked together. For a number of years, the Baptists and Methodists would worship together in the same church. During this time, Reverend Below was pastor of the Baptist Church, and Reverend Hillary Key was the first pastor of Key Memorial, from whom the church received its name. A Reverend Stanford was the first director of a high school. Our first superintendent was Captain Douglas, who served in the war between the states. Gallatin's first Negro kindergarten was taught 7 years by my mother, Mrs. Dorothy McKissack, in her home at 77 Tree Street. She handled as many as 40 students during one season and loved every minute of it. Without bragging about it, I will tell you that my mother loved children. She loved people, and she had a desire to motivate and expect perfection from them, not only in academics, but in music as well. At this particular point, it is necessary that I give you some of the history of the First Baptist Church, Gallatin, in order for you to see how interwoven our leadership has been between the church and education. As it was in Austria when I was there, the priest was also the headmaster of the school. So it was in Sumner County with black education. Many of our pastors were principals of schools, teachers, doctors, civic and community leaders. The First Baptist Church was organized soon after the close of the Civil War. The building was a log structure, and the first pastor was Bob Below. One of the first deacons was the late Reuben Carr. Reverend Below led the people until the infirmities of old age began to come upon him, and he notified his congregation to look for a more active man to take his work. Very soon there came to the town a young man who had served as a cook in the Confederate Army and had been converted and baptized by the chaplain in the Army. This young man was the late Peter Bertree. There were at this time religious services being conducted by the Methodists under an old shed near the railroad. Bertree visited this service and was introduced as a young Baptist minister. He made a few remarks and impressed the congregation to the extent someone rushed to Deacon Carr's house and notified him that a young Baptist minister was in town and who may be of service to his church. Deacon Carr came immediately and invited Bertree to go home with him. He carried Bertree to the church, and Reverend Below received him joyfully and asked the church to accept him as pastor because he was failing in strength and would soon be disabled to serve them. Reverend Bertree took charge, and soon the log church was replaced with a small frame building. The congregation soon grew too large for this building, and a larger frame building was erected. This building was wrecked by a storm and was replaced with a brick structure. Reverend Bertree pastored for 52 years. He passed January 18, 1926. Dr. J.N. Rucker was chosen to succeed him, and he served for 18 years. Dr. J.N. Rucker, who came to Gallatin from Natchez, Mississippi, wore many hats. He was pastor of First Baptist Church, principal of Union High School, medical doctor, and he also had a farm. Dr. Rucker resigned in September 1944. Mr. Peter C. Rucker, his brother, succeeded him as principal of Union High School and held this position for 2 years. Perhaps you would like to know when the first class of Union High School graduated. The first graduating class was in 1924 and consisted of the following 7 members: Harrison Reed, Evelina Bertree, Patty Patterson, Alice Woodfall, H.B. Drake, Francis Drake, and Elizabeth Wilson. under the principalship of Reverend Peter Bertrand. The teachers were Mrs. Dora Bertrand, Mrs. Gallatin McKissack, Mr. Charlie Bates, Mrs. Annie Randolph, Mrs. Bertha Baker, and Reverend Henry Thomas. There was an activity every year called Paysetter Day. Each community school would come into town to enjoy this big day, along with the parents and friends of that community. The teachers and students would set up exhibits all over the school demonstrating their creativity, innovative, and artistic ability. There would be a parade usually beginning at 9 a.m. from the school en route to the town square and back, with each teacher marching in front of all of his or her students with a placard naming that school behind the Union High School band conducted by Mr. George Randolph Office, who's sitting back there, who was the first and only band director in the black educational school system. I say school system because Mr. George Randolph Office's father was the first band director among our people in Sumner County. He was an outstanding band director who answered many requests in this country. This day motivated students. This day built self-esteem in students. This day culminated with each school participating in a program for all parents and friends of the county. The schools and teachers that were represented in those parades are as follows. And I just want to quickly run over this, and I'm going to be fast about this because I don't want to hold you. The schools, for instance, these are the teachers who were teaching at these particular schools at this time. Avondale, Osenia Bennett, and I'm tipping my hat to these teachers because they're not in this position now, but they have been, and they have contributed to Sumner County. Cairo, Hutch Brinkley, Durham Chapel, B.J. Hall, Lula Mae Baker, Hall's Chapel, DeWitt Scott, Hartfield, Catherine Harris, Hickory Grove, P.B. Tyree, Queen of Satan, Kansas, L.L.E. Rutledge, Macedonia, H.L. Tolliver, Mount Olivet, F.F.T. Coakley, Oak Grove, Idella Crocker, Oldham Ben, Sally Lou Jenkins, Harper's Chapel, Cynthia Martin, Peach Valley, Julius Hayden, Pilot Knob, Beatrice House, Rockland, Eva Wilson, St. John, Florida Mae Odom, Scattersville, Robert Smith, Allen Rule, Starkers Knob, Betty West, Stewart, Loretta M. Young, Union High, Peter C. Rucker Principal, E.A. Gray, Old Mae Robinson, Nora Bay, Eloise Lippin, J.H. Smith, Union Elementary, Peter C. Rucker, Alice Smith, Mary A. Dobbins, Callie McKissack, Edna A. Scott, Johnny Gray, Billy Green, and Lois Daniels. The elementary supervisor was Mrs. Ellen P. Hall. That brings us to the new era. The second era arrives with this resignation of Mr. Peter Rucker and searching diligently all over Tennessee for an educator who had all the qualifications of a good principal. The search ended with a young man who had already been successful in the field of education in Martin, Tennessee, was requested and he accepted the principalship of Union High School. This was none other than Mr. R.A. Stewart, who accepted the position and brought with him the rest of his family, Mrs. Mary Stewart, a very pretty and talented lady, and son, Roy Edward Stewart. Both of these two young people were dynamic educators. In the fall of 1947, Mrs. Mary Stewart, following in the footsteps of an illustrious teacher, Mrs. Nora Bates, initiated in the English department at Union High School the Senior High Annual Prize. The high school yearbook was an excellent means of recording student activities and progress in the well-defined areas of the secondary school. There was a publication each year. Mrs. Stewart came to us with an A.B. degree from Kentucky State College, received her master's from Fisk University, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa. At Union High School, she taught English, Dramatics, French, and was assistant librarian. At this time, an education explosion began. An increase in the enrollment caused a new teacher, Dorothy McKissack, to be added to the faculty and gave birth to plans for new schools. Union High School had always been blessed and fortunate to have several music teachers, namely Mrs. Evelina Rucker, Mrs. Johnny Gray, Mrs. Callie McKissack, Mrs. Dorothy Jordan, and band director, Mr. George R. Hall. Ms. Bertha Baker Rogan was also a music teacher, and at this point, I would like to mention two of our products, Mrs. Irma Stewart and Mr. Harold Gilbert, who became band director and is now a commissioner in our city. Mrs. Irma Baker Stewart was inspired enough to get her master's in music from TSU. The teachers of Union High School were striving to produce a good product. The Middle Tennessee Teachers Association decided to use the symposium as a means to expose our African American students to the best in the arts. You know, I told you we can use any name we want to, so you just expect me to use any of these. Colors, black, African American, any of them, it means the same person, same group. In the music department, there were solos, trios, quartets, girls' courses, boys' courses, mixed course. The band was also a group that was rated. Each school in Middle Tennessee was encouraged to compete, and this we did. Experienced college professors would be the judges for these events. Mrs. Stewart, Mrs. Jordan, Mr. Offutt received many superior and excellent ratings during those years. When I call the names of the faculty and tell you the subjects they taught at Union High School, after the 1 through 12 Union High separated and Mr. B.J. Hall became principal of the elementary school, you will understand what I meant when I said education explosion. You will notice the expansion of the curriculum. At this particular time, Reverend Stewart was the principal and he was teaching science. E.A. Gray, agriculture, and he was assistant coach. G.R. Offutt, social studies, science, and band. S.G. Harris, health, physical education, and coach. J.M. Everson, mathematics, industrial arts, and track coach. Ms. Oda Robinson, mathematics, and dean of girls. Mrs. Mary Alexander Dobbins, civics and English. Mrs. Evelyn P. Hall, and I'm calling all these persons because all these persons had been home economics teachers in this particular school. Mrs. Evelyn P. Hall, Mrs. Gladys Moore, Mrs. Anna D. Higgins, Mrs. Doris Anthony had all been home economics teachers. Mrs. L.F. Dobbins had also been a home economics teacher. Dorothy McKissack Jordan, music, librarian, typewriting, shorthand, 7th and 8th grade English and accounting. Ms. Mary Stewart, English, dramatics, and French. By this time, the explosion was taking effect. We no longer had to wear blue jeans on our basketball team or play basketball in Hancock's basketball or outside. Many of our community leaders had been interested enough in the progress of our children and Gallatin citizenry, along with the principal, Reverend R.A. Stewart, and faculty, to influence the board to build 2 educational facilities. I know my father was so concerned that he sprained his ankle teaching over at the Venus Stewart School, and he did not let that deter him. He just went on and bought him a pair of crutches and kept on making contact so we could keep on making progress. He was calling on the phone, telephones, and then he would report back to the principal. He had a love for Gallatin and his people, and that Gallatin would never be any better than his worst section. And I feel that today. If we have a worst section in Gallatin, we need to work on it, because the whole of Gallatin can be no worse, no better than one of its worst sections. This kept him striving to try to make Gallatin give it as much as possible to be a better place than we should be. I know these things because I lived at home. When he died, he had plans for sidewalks going up small streets to Union High School in his bed. This was in 1958, and you know we were just getting sidewalks on one side of Small Street a very few years ago. Small Street was an elite section and a respected section leading up to this institution of learning at that particular time. The last time I saw Mr. Otis Kemp, he was telling me how he enjoyed working on various projects for the betterment of our people with Dr. McKissack. Let us not forget that God was with us continually in our struggle for improvement. We haven't reached the top yet. We still have a lot of work to do. And we are hoping that each one of us can do something that will contribute to our improvement. It was God who opened the hearts of Mr. and Mrs. Elijah's Chambers. They owned the land and stipulated that it was to be sold to blacks for their improvement. Many people do not know this, but we must realize Sumner County could not be where it is today without the works and foresight of those who preceded us. History is written in order that we can remind ourselves of the past and improve on the present and future. The teachers at this new Union High School, as well as others in the county, work hard with the students to motivate, stimulate, inspire, and guide them to a life of academic achievement, along with other worthwhile values such as morality and spirituality. We realized that the students who were coming to us perhaps had been taught by many methods. The state was constantly changing the methods of teaching, such as the unit method, the block style method. One time, the children were being taught to pronounce words or sounds. For instance, horse would be spelled H-O-R-S, because you could not hear the E. You all don't believe that, but that's true. This method proved a setback to the children. The alphabet was not taught, consequently many could not use a dictionary. The new math came along and presented another challenge. However, regardless of the child's background, we put forth that little extra effort to show them that we genuinely cared. We constantly gave encouragement and individual attention. We wanted them to have hope for the future. I would like to quote to you Reverend R.A. Stewart's words from the principal's message to the graduates in 1958. He said, "To you, the members of the class of 1958, I offer sincere congratulations upon your graduation from high school and good wishes for your success in life. As graduates, you join the ever-increasing throng of fine and successful men and women who are sons and daughters of Union High School. Therefore, you should be challenged to always uphold the honor, integrity, loyalty, industry, and spirit of fair play, which we have sought to instill within you at your beloved alma mater. Forsake not high moral, spiritual, and ethical values. In these turbulent and trying times, you must be ever mindful of temptations and evil forces which will seek to ensnare you and prevent you from living clean and wholesome lives and thwart the attainment of your goals. Take God as your constant companion and guide. In this way, you can withstand, endure, persevere, and overcome. Remember that high school education is only the beginning. Continue to study, forge ahead, and gain additional preparation that you may be better prepared to live more wholesome and useful lives. Forget not the advice of your parents, teachers, and others interested in your welfare. Carry with you words of Bishop Ralph Spalding Cushman as you face and grapple with the problem of the future. I will not quit, however hard the fight. I will not quit the conflict and the right. I will not yield, however sore the strife. This is the way the Master trod to victory and life. You go forth with our good wishes and our prayers. Your principals and friends are restored. Activities that we had at our school, some of the activities in which the students participated were as follows. New Farmers of America under the sponsorship of Mr. E.A. Gray. Alfonso Leon Smith won the National NFA Award, and when told about his award, he remarked, "A winner never quits, and a quitter never wins." He is now a medical doctor. He's Dr. Alfonso Smith. New Homemakers of America was another activity sponsored by Mrs. Ellen Lee Dobbins. Literary Dramatic Guild, sponsored by Mrs. Mary Stewart. Music Guild, sponsored by yours truly. Basketball, football, Mr. S.C. Harris. Basketball, football, Mr. E.A. Gray. Mr. Stewart was true in Sumner County's tradition of principals being pastors, or pastors being principals, or teachers such as Reverend Julia Payton, Reverend D.B. Scott, Reverend T.J. Griffin, Reverend Peter Tyree, and maybe others. Reverend Stewart became pastor of Key Memorial Methodist Church, and a new church was constructed under his leadership, which became Keith Stewart United Methodist Church. His successor at Union High School was Mr. John Bertrich Malone. Mr. Malone graduated from Union High in 1927. I want you to notice how after they got their education here, they went off and finished their education up, and they came back to Gallatin. Notice how graduates come back to serve. That was a slogan at Tennessee University that stated, "Enter to learn, go forth to serve." Mr. Malone received his BS degree from TSU and MA from Fisk University. His understanding, guidance, and willingness to help anyone seeking aid won for him the confidence of the students. Under him, we had also added teachers, and I want you to notice that in this group of teachers, we are beginning to integrate. Mrs. Gwendolyn Crawford, Social Administration. Miss Betty Hawkins, English, Mrs. Betty Hawkins. Mr. John Randall, Mathematics. Mr. Hubert C. Scott, Health and PE. Mr. Joseph Copley, Science. Mrs. Isabella Rogan, Social Studies, Health and PE. Mr. Walter Hallman, Building Construction. Ms. Vanity Liggins, Science and English. Mrs. Sarah Coffee, French, English. Mr. William C. Dickens, I don't know what he taught. Mr. Frank D. Brinkley, natural science. Mr. Phyllis Hunt Peters, Spanish, English. Mr. Ed Martin, driver's education. We learned how to drive the cars now. Social studies. Ms. Alice Malone was teacher's aide, and Ms. Dorothy Hill was secretary. Our faculty was becoming mixed, so you know that desegregation had arrived, but not full integration. Other teachers who served under the principalship of Mr. B.J. Hall were Mrs. Bessie McClellan, Ms. Marlene Wood, Mr. John Carter, and Mr. T.J. Griffith. This history would be incomplete without mentioning some of the rich music. But I just want to mention, in thinking about our music, I would just like to mention that we started off with string bands, singing bands, and then string bands. And I would like to mention some of the instruments that these people at that particular time were playing. Now, you can notice some of these in Gallatin now. Why don't you tell me about that, too? We had people who played the violin, the bass violin, the banjo, the clarinet, guitar, we have guitar, mandolin, guitar. Some of these people were blind. And I even found my grandfather here playing the guitar, the bass violin, the French harp. And they played all these types of instruments back there in their time. It just took two instruments to make a band. But the first brass band was organized by the late Professor Julius Strauss of Austin. When he was very young, his talent was discovered. Many times he was seen in the backyard directing and instructing a group of boys his age, their instruments being only tin cans and tin buckets. As he grew older, he had an opportunity to study music. Now I'm going to stop right here, and I want Mr. Officer to stand up, so if you all don't know him, just look around. There he is back there. He's the biggest man on the back row back there. Sit down, Mr. Officer. There he is.
I got a trumpet in my office.
This band proved to be a success, but many members moved away. Thus, the first band was disbanded. Another band was soon organized, the fate of which was the same. But I just wanted you to know some of the music teachers that we had back there in those days. Miss Susan Reed, Miss Fanning Harrison, Miss Martha Moore, Annie Randolph Carter, Callie B. McKissack, Nanny Light Miller, Evelina Rucker, Miss Bertha Baker, Miss Nanny Light, Mrs. Nancy G. Wallace, and more. They also had a dance that they did, the square dance, the Virginia reel, the pigeon wing, the waltz. One cannot forget that before the new Union High School was built, that the baccalaureate services were held on a Sunday at First Baptist Church on Winchester. And the week was filled with various activities. And on Friday, there would be commencement with gifts galore piled on the stage for each graduate. As years passed, students would bring boxes to put their presents in. We knew we had some proud parents on commencement day. That would be valedictorian or salutatorian of each class, taught by their respective English teachers. Before Mrs. Stewart came, there was Mrs. Nora Bates. These students would deliver their address with dignity. Mrs. Evelyn P. Hall was the dean supervisor at this time. We remember her for her untiring efforts in behalf of the children of Sumner County. She is credited with initiating the Girl Scout movement, and Mr. Edward B. Anthony and Dr. W. McKissack were credited with initiating the Boy Scout movement. Mrs. Hall served as Assistant Corresponding Secretary of the Tennessee Education Congress and the Middle Tennessee Teachers Association. Besides supervising the work of the Sumner County Association, she was a member of the ACA, the NEA, the National Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, the National Deans Association, Secretary of Region 2, NJA, member of the LBVET Chapter ODS, and the Tennessee Congress of Colored Parents and Teachers. In 1945, Sumner County could boast about the number of minority teachers that there were. There were 37 teachers and there were 21 schools. We did not hear of a shortage of minority teachers in those days. Another exciting accomplishment in 1945 proved to us that a good job was being done in this black educational school system. I want you to listen to this. National Administrative Board for Testicola Scholarships, a 4-year college scholarship together with this certificate of merit is awarded to James Deotha Malone of Gallatin Union High School in recognition of a distinguished performance on the Scholastic Aptitude Test of the Testicola Scholarship for high school graduates. Certificates of merit are awarded to the students in each state who scored highest on the test, given on April 16, 1945 to 14,500 students throughout the United States. Floyd W. Reed, President. I want Ms. Malone to stand. Now, she's the one. She's the one. This student, why she stands, I want to finish this. No. You just stand right there. This student, Ms. Malone, has become not only a supervisor in our education system, but the vice mayor of Gallatin, has remained helpful, humble, and compassionate. I want you to know that she has her doctorate from the University of Alabama, University of Arkansas. She did postgraduate work in the University of Bangalore, India, Hebrew University in Israel, University of Notre Dame. Now, you know she needs to be standing up. And she taught English and was librarian over at Union High School. She's the organizer right now of adult education, presently supervisor of secondary education and international education. Dr. Malone, we salute you. You may do it. There are more students to salute than we have time. However, Miss Mary Harper, some of you may know her, a polio victim, is one of our products who is in her 29th year of teaching. She is a second grade teacher at Howard School. Mary has tenacity and perseverance. Even though she had polio, she took title, and she can type. She is an excellent example to any student who accepts to teach. Others that we can salute are Dr. Brenda Valentine, assistant principal at Howard Elementary, Dr. Richard Hall, being considered for the presidency of GSU, Mr. Andrew C. Turner, he's here tonight, principal at Russell Susan. Some of these are here tonight. Dr. Dorothy McKissack is a Denison Jackson in Chicago. Detective Caldwell Jenkins is employee of the City of Gallatin. Ms. Gwendolyn Smith, principal at Bordeaux Elementary School. Mr. Paul Copley, principal of Harriet Tubman Magnet School. Mr. Joseph Malone, assistant principal in Portland, Oregon. I can't call everybody, but I was trying to pull out some that you all might not have heard of in a while. Dr. Alfonso Smith is gynecologist, Woodbury, New Jersey. Ms. Ellis Coleman, assistant principal at Gallatin High, was one of our products before full integration came. And Reverend R.E. Stewart is pastor of 5 churches, one being newly constructed and the others being renovated. Dr. Robert Boone, Vice President, Tennessee State University. Mrs. Mary Carver Patrick. Mrs. Mary Carver Patrick, a 1965 Union High School graduate, has been with the Metro School System for 23 years and has served in the capacity of Department Coordinator for 16 years. 5 years ago, she moved to Hunter's Lane School, a state-of-the-art school of the Southeast, and was appointed to open and set up the business and office education department and to coordinate activities for 6 other teachers in her department. Ms. Carver Patrick is the executive sponsor of the Business Professionals America Club at Hunter's Lane and gained national recognition when her team beat out 32 teams at 3 different levels to become first in the nation. I could not help but be happy to know that she was my business student, and in some way might have given her the background to do what she's doing today. It would be impossible to name all the students who were inspired to become somebody of value to himself and society. We taught. Some of our sons and daughters are in business right here in Gallatin to serve you. Mrs. Eleanor Brinkley, Muirhead. She has a hat shop and is a beautician. Mrs. Frances Drake Malone is sewing and alteration. To come even closer to home, there's Mrs. Betty C. Williams, Volunteer State Community College, Associate Professor of Health and Physical Education, degrees BS, CSU, MA, in Education, CSU, ABD, and if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you. All but dissertation from MTSU. Ms. Gloria Douglas, Modernistic Beauty Parlor. Ms. Pope, she has found touch. We taught because to us teaching was a sacred trust. We entrusted with God. We were entrusted with God's creation. We are all God's miracles. Think of what a miracle you are. God gave you 9 months to develop into a being, a human being. He made sure that he did his job well. He gave us eyes. in order that we could focus well. He gave us 2 of them. He gave us a pair of holes in our nose in order that we could breathe from. He gave us a pair of beautifully designed ears. If you haven't seen yours, stop and look at them sometime. In order to be able to hear he didn't give us but 1 mouth. But if you don't know it, it is the most important part of your body. It keeps your body alive. The teeth improve the formation of your face. Did you know that God gave us 8 incisors, meaning cut like scissors, 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom? He gave us 4 canines, which can be called eye teeth or dog teeth, which means tearing teeth. He gave us 8 bicuspids, 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom. Didn't he take time about 2 points through them, made to grind up food for the molars? He gave us 6 molars at the bottom, 3 on both sides. He gave us 6 molars at the top. He gave all of them. He didn't point out any color to give us that. He gave everybody those. We've had these in our mouths. Some of us didn't know we had them. We taught as though the student was going to major in our subject. And without a good basic foundation in our particular subject, he or she could not survive in college. I remember in a shorthand class one day, I asked each student what he or she plans to become. John Dennis Nelson said, I would like to be a certified public accountant. I asked the class if they would like us to include accounting along with the shorthand. They all purchased their own textbooks. And today, John Nelson is a CPA. God had endowed our students with talents that some of them did not know they had. We taught because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And each individual needs to contribute something positive to society. If our students decide to become an inventor, as Garrett A. Morgan, who invented the traffic light, we want nothing to deter him. The opportunity to get ahead isn't always a matter of red or green. Historically, it's often been a question of black and white. Luckily, Garrett A. Morgan didn't see color as an obstacle. Instead, this son of a former slave overcame tremendous pressure to become one of the most important American inventors of this century. His creations range from a hair straightening cream to the gas mask, which saved thousands of lives during World War I, and which they are using now in Saudi Arabia. Oh, yes. But I also understand that America, I read this today, America is purchasing gas masks from the Israelis. But it was Mr. Morgan's development of the traffic signal which perhaps best symbolizes his life in 1923. Automobiles were increasing in number, and so were automobile accidents. After witnessing one accident down the street from his house, he developed and sold his patent for a traffic safety light in General Electric, the forerunner of the traffic lights we see on practically every corner in the world. It typified his concern for the safety of people everywhere, his perseverance, and his refusal to let the color of his skin color anyone's perception of his ability. He may have invented the traffic signal, but he never saw a red light. We taught because we did not want our students to see a red light in front of them. Today, we find far too many American children at the onset of puberty face an incredible smorgasbord of challenges with a deficiency in capability. Self-confidence, self-discipline, good judgment, and a sense of responsibility are all lacking, and our children find themselves incapable of carving out assets for themselves. What is our answer today for a dropout rate of 1 out of 4? What is our solution today for there being 60,000 persons incarcerated in New York alone, and the government has spent or spending $3,000 per inmate to the meager amount per student? What is the answer for us here in Gallatin when our jail needs expanding constantly and brains are being fried like eggs? How does the world know just whose brains the solution to the AIDS virus is locked in? Every child needs to develop to its fullest potential, which also includes a sense of gratitude for teachers. Where would America be today without having had well-qualified and dedicated teachers? Teachers need to understand that what they do is important.